striking before her victims can even see her coming, Neve Blacktalon is as swift as lightning and as utterly devastating. A single-minded hunter, she can quickly close the distance to the most powerful enemy warlords and hews them apart with a torrent of blows from her whirlwind axes. Hi there, in this video we'll be showing you how to paint Neve Blacktalon and get her looking great on the gaming table in no time. The paints we'll be using are on screen now. As well as any additional equipment we've used. If you're new to painting or want to brush up on your skills, you can check out the Citadel Colour Painting Essentials videos to learn all about our paints and painting techniques. We've undercoated Neve using Retributor Armour Spray. This gives us a great head start on all that gold. An awesome feature about the Blacktalons is that they're all push-fit models, meaning that they can be assembled without any glue. This means we're able to remove pieces like the cape to make painting easier. Whilst we have this opportunity, we decided to undercoat the cape separately. We've undercoated it with Grey Sear Spray to make painting all that white a little easier. If you don't want to do this, that's absolutely fine. Do whichever undercoating method works for you. After undercoating our model, the first step is to paint Retributor Armour all over the armour. We're doing this because the Retributor Armour Spray has a slightly different finish and will ensure that if we make any mistakes later, we can clean them up. We'll be applying this using a medium base brush. Because we've already sprayed Retributor Armour, you'll only need to apply one coat. Just make sure to thin it down with some water first. As you can see, we've left the cape off to make painting Neve's back much easier, but you don't have to do this if you don't want to. We've applied that coat of Retributor Armour over the undercoat and now we've got a much nicer finish. Before we move on, we're going to quickly change our paint water. This may seem strange as we've only used one paint so far, but we don't want to contaminate any of our other paints with those metallic flakes from the gold. The next step is to apply Reikland Flesh Shade straight from the pot all over Neve's armour. We'll be doing this using a medium shade brush. Keep the paint moving to avoid any pooling and make sure to get into all the recesses. Don't worry if you do see any pooling building up, just grab a dry brush and soak it up. Depending on how dark you want the gold to be, you can put on as little or as much shade as you like. You'll only need one coat of this, but you'll need to leave it for about an hour to dry. The Reikland Flesh Shade is fully dried and you can see it's really helped to define all that armour. Now it's really important that the shade is completely dry before we move on, because the next step is to dry brush Liberator Gold all over the armour and highlight all those edges. We'll be doing this using a small dry brush. Get some paint onto your brush and rub it into some kitchen roll or cardboard, whatever works for you. When you've only got a small amount of paint left on your brush, start moving it back and forth across the model. Start lightly at first, you can always apply it heavier later if you want to build up that colour further. Keep dry brushing all over the armour until you're happy, focusing on the edges and raised areas. With that step finished, the gold armour is complete. Next, we're going to paint all the black details using Corvus Black. Get some Corvus Black onto your palette and thin it down with a small amount of water. We'll be applying this using a small layer brush. Go around the model and pick out any areas that you want to be black. We'll be painting the undersuit, Boltstorm pistol and hair, but you can choose as many or as little details to paint black as you'd like. Just remember to be careful when painting around the armour, as you want to avoid making mistakes if we can. If you do make any mistakes, don't worry, we can always go back with Retributor Armour and fix them up. Remember to apply the paint in 2 thin layers and let the first layer dry before moving on to the second one. If you're painting in sub-assemblies like us, don't forget about the ponytail attached to the cape piece. We've applied 2 thin layers of Corvus Black and now it's time to move on to another colour. Next we'll be painting all the bronze areas like the axes with Balthazar Gold. There's also this small decoration on the Boltstorm pistol that we're going to paint with Balthazar Gold too. Using a small base brush, we're going to thin it down with a small amount of water first and then apply it in 2 thin layers. Remember to let the first layer dry before moving on to the next one. We've finished applying the Balthazar Gold to all the areas that we want to be bronze, and now it's time to paint all those silver details. We'll be using Lead Belcher for this. We're going to be picking out the axe blades, belt buckle and a few remaining areas on the Boltstorm pistol with Lead Belcher, but remember it's completely up to you which areas you select. Using a small airbrush, we're going to thin our Lead Belcher down with a bit of water first and then apply it to our chosen areas in 2 thin layers. With the Lead Belcher applied, all those metallic areas have been blocked in and Neve is really starting to look awesome. Before we move on, we're going to change our paint water once again to stop those pesky metallic flakes getting into our other paints. Next, we'll be applying Macragge Blue to all the blue areas on Neve using a small layer brush. We'll be painting the tabard and the badge on the torso. Remember to thin your paint down with some water first and apply the Macragge Blue in 2 thin layers, leaving enough time in between for each layer to dry. All the Macragge Blue has been applied and now Neve's really starting to look like a true Stormcast. We've only got a few more steps left until she's battle ready. We're going to move on to Screamer Pink now, using it to paint the axe handles and Neve's hair accessories. We're using a small layer brush for this. Thin it down with some water first and be as careful as you can when you apply it. try to avoid getting any Screamer Pink onto those other colours. We've applied 2 thin coats of Screamer Pink, and now it's time to shade all those new colours we've added. We'll start by applying Northern Oil straight from the pot using a small base brush onto the weapons, blue areas, hair and undersuit. After that, we're going to switch to a medium base brush and thin down our Northern Oil with some Lamia Medium. We'll be thinning it down to 1 part Northern Oil to 4 parts Lamia Medium. Get 4 blobs of medium onto your palette, clean your brush, and then add 1 blob of Northern Oil. Once we've done that, we're going to apply the thinned down Northern Oil all over the inside of the cape. We thinned it down with some Lamia Medium first because we're painting over a white area and we don't want that shade to be too overpowering. Thinning it down will make it nice and subtle. Take your time and keep the shade moving to avoid any pooling. It will take around an hour to fully dry. With the Northern Oil applied, Neve Black Talon is really starting to look awesome. There's just a couple of key areas left to paint, the first being her face. To paint her skin, we'll be using Corax White and then finishing it up with Guilliman Flesh. This is a super easy way to paint skin, but if you want to know some more alternative advanced methods for painting skin, check out our video on how to paint 3 different skin tones. Using a small airbrush, we're going to thin our Corax White down with a bit of water before applying it to the face. It's really important that you apply this in several thin layers. 3 or 4 usually does the trick. It's also important that whilst we paint each layer, we don't paint over the same area more than once. It can be tempting to paint over an area that hasn't covered very well with another few brush strokes, but resist the urge. Trust us, if we build up a solid colour slowly, the results will be much better and we'll avoid any unwanted texture building up. Just focus on getting paint over the whole area and allowing it to dry before going back and adding more. The first layer should look something like this, and the fourth will look like this. While we've got our Corax White ready on the palette, we can also go ahead and paint the centre of each gem across the model. We'll finish these off later with a neat trick. We've finished applying all the Corax White and now Neve is super close to being ready for battle. The next step is to add Guilliman Flesh to the face. We're going to start by applying Guilliman Flesh mixed with a small amount of contrast medium all over the skin using a small base brush. We've thinned it down to 1 part medium to 1 part Guilliman Flesh. Once that's dry, we're then going to add a second coat of Guilliman Flesh, this time straight from the pot, and apply it only in the recesses using a small layer brush. And there we are, Neve's skin is complete, which leaves only a couple big areas left to paint. That's going to be the fur on the cape and the base. Before we get to those though, we're going to finish the last few small details like the gems. This is a super quick, easy and very satisfying step. We're going to use a small layer brush and apply Blood Angel's Red straight from the pot into all those gems. Because we only painted the centre of each gem with Corax White, we're left with this cool effect that gives them lots of depth. But the best thing about this step is that it's super easy to switch out the colour. You can replace Blood Angel's Red with any contrast paint you like. It will work with any colour. So if you're in the mood for some green gems, you could instead use Hexray Flame. It's completely up to you. Now we've just got the base and the cape left to paint. We'll start by painting all those awesome looking stones and rocks on Neve's base using Mechanicus Standard Grey. We'll thin this down with some water first and then apply it using a medium base brush. Don't worry about being careful on the smaller stones, we'll be painting the ground later anyway. You will have to be careful near Neve's feet though. Switch to a smaller brush if that's easier for you. You'll need to apply this in 2 thin layers. While we're using Mechanicus Standard Grey, we can also highlight some of the black areas with a quick dry brush. If you'd like to, work the paint into the bristles of your brush until there's only a little bit left on, and then carefully move it back and forth across Neve's hair. We're using a small dry brush because this is quite a small area. You can also lightly dry brush the bolts on pistol and the undersuit if you'd like to. With the Mechanicus Standard Grey applied, the base is close to finished and Neve received a super quick and easy highlight which looks great. We're now going to move on to getting that fur on the cape painted, which is the largest area left to paint. If you've been painting the cape separately like us, you may find this step easier if you attach the cape back to the rest of the model. Once you're ready, we can start by applying Rhinox hide to all the fur. While we're at it, we can also paint the belt and any leather straps on the model. You'll need to thin this down with a bit of water first as normal and apply it in 2 thin layers. We'll be using a medium base brush for this, switching to a smaller base brush for those harder to reach areas. We've finished applying 2 thin layers of Rhinox hide and now we're going to shade all those newly added brown areas. We're going to be using Agrax Earthshade for this, applying it to the large areas with a medium shade brush and to the small areas using a small base brush, straight from the pot. Keep the paint moving and make sure to get it into all those recesses. With the brown shaded Neve is close to battle ready. All that's left is to finish her base and then she'll be ready for the gaming table. So let's move on. There's only 2 more paints to add to the base to finish it off. The first is Death Guard Green. We'll be using this to paint all the ground areas on the base, avoiding all those stones that we painted earlier. Make sure to thin it down with some water first and apply it in a couple of thin layers. Once the Death Guard Green has been applied, the next step is to shade the whole base using a Chthonian Camo shade, straight from the pot. We'll be applying this using a medium shade brush. Once again, be careful around Neve's feet. This will take about an hour to fully dry. And there we are! Neve Black Talon is battle ready and she'll look great on the gaming table. You could definitely leave the paint job here if you wanted to, but we're going to show you a few extra steps that you can take to make her look extra awesome. The first one of those extra steps is a quick dry brush of Gawthorpe Brown over all the fur. We're using a small dry brush for this, but you can use whatever you like. When you're ready, start lightly dry brushing the Gawthorpe Brown over all the fur. As we move up the fur and we get higher on the cape, we're going to make the dry brush heavier. This will add a cool looking transition and make the fur look more natural. You can be as heavy or as light with this as you like, depending on how vibrant you want the brown to be. The dry brush of Gawthorpe Brown has been applied, and as you can see, that super easy quick step has really gone a long way towards making Neve look fantastic. Another extra step we're going to do is add an edge highlight of Runefang Steel. We're going to do this using a small layer brush, and I'm just going to go around the armour, picking out any edges we want to. We're also going to highlight the axe blades. Then you paint down with some water first, and let's get started. If you're feeling extra dangerous, you can also add some cool looking scratch marks to those axes. Neve Black Talon has been in countless battles. Adding scratch marks like this to the axes will help show your enemies that she's bested countless generals in combat before and that they're next in line to be slain. What's really fun about this step is that it can be as simple or as complex as you like. Whether you pick out just a couple edges on the sharpest bits of the armour or every single edge on the model, either way, your Neve Black Talon will look extra awesome. Our Neve Black Talon is finally complete and she looks awesome. The only thing left to do is to paint the rim of the base. We've done this in Abaddon Black, but you can use any colour you like. For more tutorials, tips and tricks, check out our videos on the Warhammer YouTube channel. Or you can head to your local Warhammer store where our amazing staff will be happy to help. Thanks for watching this video. See you next time.